Good morning everybody, Peter Newman from RE here. Welcome to another Weed Smart webinar. This morning we are talking chaff carts with Lance Turner. So we've got a couple of webinars in sequence here. Last week we had Rod Messina. We had a really good reception from his windrow burning webinar. And this week Lance has agreed to come on. Lance is down in Corrigan. Good morning, Lance.
Good morning, Pete.
That's good, it's working. Okay, so we'll hear from Lance in a minute. Now, we had a bit of trouble with the questions last week, and so I was wondering if a few people out there could please just type good morning or hello or something like that into the questions box, just so we can troubleshoot that, and then we'll see if we've got it working. We know we've got a bit of a problem at my end, but I think that Ellen from Coxinall, who's in the co-pilot seat, can sort it out and email us some questions as we go. So, yeah, so if someone could please type a question in or a comment, and we'll know that it's working. So I'll just do the standard couple of minutes of housekeeping to get us started. As we always say, you can minimise that menu box on the right-hand side of your screen by clicking on that orange arrow. If you want to get it back, you just click on the arrow again. And questions, type them into the questions box. I've just received word from Ellen that she is seeing your questions. So Ellen's going to see your questions and email them to me, and I'll get them off my iPhone and I'll ask Lance. So we will get it to work one way or another. So the questions are working. So yeah, please, plenty of questions as we go. That'd be great. The only other thing you might like to do is copy down Ellen's phone number there. If it all goes pear-shaped and you lose connection and you want to get it back, you can call Ellen from Coxinall, and Ellen will fix everything, hopefully. But she should be able to help you through any connection problems. Okay, so we're just about good to go. Just a little bit about Weed Smart. I think we say this every time, so many of you have heard it before, but there's probably some of you out there who haven't logged in before, but Weed Smart is an industry initiative. The chemical companies, seed companies and GRDC have pooled resources. They each put in some funding each year to put together a project called Weed Smart. It's currently run by Lisa Mayer from RE. Lisa's managing the project, and there's lots of media, there's webinars, there's workshops, and really Weed Smart is about just having that consistent message about managing herbicide-resistant weeds coming from the industry. It's been very successful. I think we're in year 3 now, and we're very pleased for it to be still going strong. And these webinars are part of it. We're running 8 webinars for the financial year, so this is our 2nd webinar in the series. Okay, so Ellen, if you can hand over to Lance. We're just about ready to go. We've got lots of attendees logged on, and we'll get it going. So last week we heard from Rod Messina about windrow burning. Windrow burning was where a lot of harvest weed seed control began, and as I said, we have a technique where we get a farmer who's a windrow burner, put them in the Tarago with Lance Turner for a week, and at the end of the week they buy chaff carts. Is that how it works, Lance?
Apparently so.
Yeah. So what I'm talking about there is Lance and the Messinas and Ray Harrington and others have been very generous with their time. They've travelled around the country with us, giving presentations to growers about chaff carts. I was fortunate enough to be on the billing with Lance at Esperance once, and talking to growers afterwards, recalling the day, they were saying how good Lance was and how they went and bought a chaff cart after hearing from Lance. And I said, did you remember anything else about that day? And they said no. And I said, well, I spoke for half an hour before Lance. So yeah, farmers learning from farmers is a very powerful thing. We're very grateful for Lance giving up his time and travelling around the country, but also doing this webinar for people who can't get there in person. So Lance, I'm going to hand over to you now and let you go through your presentation. But how many years is it that you've been towing the chaff cart now?
Yeah, I think it's about 10, maybe 11 years, Pete. I should sit down and work it out properly, but it's been quite a while now. Yeah, and it's been probably about 5 or 6 years, 5 years, I think, that we've actually had 2 of them with the two headers. So we actually bought a second chaff cart before we bought the second header, because we wanted to make sure we went that way.
Yeah, and the results are speaking for themselves. We'll get to that later in your presentation, but your farm is cleaner than ever, and is that fair to say?
Yeah, look, we've still got our problem areas, as does everyone, but on the whole, it's yeah, it's pretty clean. Yep.
Okay. Well, I'll hand over to you, Lance, and then we'll pause periodically as we go for some questions.
No worries. All right, thanks, Pete. Yeah, as you can see on the screen there, we farm 50 kilometres east of Pingelly, which puts us 50 kilometres west of Corrigin, basically in the middle of the two. As with anywhere in Western Australia, if you farm west of a town, you always grow better crops. So if we call ourselves West Corrigin, we actually grow better crops than we do East Pingelly. But having said that, we also farm east of Corrigin as well on some heavy red country. So we farm like Jekyll and Hyde. What I mean by that is, back at the home end, on the western end, it's, duplex sand plain, higher rainfall, pretty much got to give the crop everything that it needs. Out east, it's the total opposite. It's predominantly heavy red country, lower rainfall, and it's pretty much just play the season as whatever happens. So two totally different thinkings. pHs on the duplex sand plain started off a few years ago. We had a couple of sites down under 4, mostly about 4.2 to 4.3. So lots of lime being used there, slowly bringing it up. We're out east on the heavy red country, pHs of 8.5 to 9. So it's two total opposite, thinkings, which keeps it interesting for us because you've got two different caps to wear, basically. Okay, Pete, I've got a problem here. It's not scrolling.
It's all right. Just get your mouse and do one click on your slide, and then use your arrow. You just click once.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, you'll be right now.
Yep. Right. Yep. Yeah. So there's just a map of where we are. The two properties either side of Corrigin. Yeah, it's just a picture of seeding time, which is no different to anyone else, Australia-wide, I suppose. Western Australia timing is everything, so it's it's a bit like a pit stop, I suppose. You do as much as you can in one go. The tipper there has the 3 compartments in it for the 3 bins on the air seeder, water truck out behind, to fill up the treff land, so that keeps it sort of keeps things moving. I just sort of wanted to highlight that what we were doing wasn't, it's no different than anyone else, but what we did with harvest is, it's got to keep things rolling. We've been continuous crop since 1990. Now we haven't taken at the home end, haven't taken a paddock out of crop in that time. We were half wheat, half lupins. Some of the easiest cropping we did, what wasn't wheat was lupins, what was lupins wasn't lupins was wheat, so it was pretty easy. But we pretty quickly ran into problems with resistance. So we had to bring in a few different things. We brought in barley to get higher rates of treff land. We brought in canola later on. But it's about that time I did a RIM program, and it really highlighted to me, it didn't matter how we twisted our rotations. I thought we won't need to do a chaff cart. We can twist our rotations around. We can bring in a whole different group of chemicals and that sort of stuff. But with this program, it didn't matter which way we twisted everything. Eventually we were going to be out of the game and run into problems. So by doing that program, it got us into the thinking that maybe we had to go down this path. But we were no different to everybody else. At the time, the perceptions of chaff carts, they slow harvest up. The extra breakdowns, and the biggest issue that we had was the burning of the dumps. So we thought about it for a long time, kept thinking back to this RIM program. It was one of those things that was always in the back of our mind. So the problems that we had to solve, was, like I say, was all the slowing up of harvest and that sort of stuff. So we had some cousins down the road, and their next door neighbours who had chaff carts. Now a chaff cart's not new, an elevator's not new, an elevator on a chaff cart is not new. But you know, our cousin down the road, they had an elevator on a char cart, and they were catching everything out of the back of the header. So we went and had a look at that and said, well, we don't really want to catch everything. We still just want to catch the chaff. So we sort of sat back and looked at it and said, well, why can't we make a short elevator that brings the chaff back from the back of the header and then put it on the big one, so we're still catching just the chaff. What that did for us, it made it a lot easier on the machine, on the header, because we didn't have a blower pulling horsepower off the header. We were just running a belt. It was positive as far as it took everything off the sieves with no, you know, like no slowdowns. You know, like with a blower, you've got a bit of a compromise. If you want capacity out of your header, you've got to accept a bit of wastage over that tailgate. If you want to get all your weeds, you've got to slow down to you know, get everything through that blower. With the elevator system like this, you know, it just caught the stuff straight off the sieves, put it on that belt, and it was up into the cart. So, and that belt took less horsepower than what our Kirby spinner did, let alone what a blower does off a chaff cart. Just another one there of the, you know, you can see there the short elevator on the side of, you know, from the side view there, and that's bringing the stuff back off the sieves, dropping it onto the long belt up into the cart. So what we're doing there is just showing is, yeah, we're still chopping and spreading all the residue out of off the rotors. So we're not taking everything in this case, and you can see there what's on the belt. Now that's just normal draper belt. So those lines that you can see across are, you know, the slats of the belt. So you don't, it's not a huge amount of material. So, you know, even though you think of the conveyor belt going up there, it's just a light smattering of material. So we're only just taking what's off the sieves and still chopping and spreading the rest of the residue. Another one there from the side, just showing, you know, how, you know, all the residue is being spread. So, you know, I used to call it trash, but I got in trouble over that. So it's, you know, you've been able to keep the residue.
Yeah, so Lance, just one thing, I don't know if I'm going to preempt it from later on, but I think if you go back to your previous slide, I don't think your header throws the full width of the comb, does it, with the residue, as you call it. You move the header over every year, don't you, to make sure you get the even distribution of residue, don't you? Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, our choppers don't quite spread the full 36 feet, and probably more when we went to auto steer. You know, we had a chaff cart before we had auto steer, but when we went to auto steer, after about 4 years, we noticed waves in the crop, and it matched up with the harvest runs because it was, yeah, the header was in the same run line every year. So probably for the last, you know, 5 or 6 years, every second year we just, when we pull into a paddock, we offset our runs by about half the comb, and within 2 seasons those waves disappeared. Now that's a chopper issue on our machines. It's not a, you know, not a chaff cart issue. Yeah. We do tramline. Everything is tramlined that's wet, like so spraying and seeding, but our headers don't fit the system. So we have no issues with yeah, moving over that that little bit. And yeah, maybe I'm looking for an answer that I like, but any builder will tell you can't compact dry soil. So I think harvest time we don't get the compaction issue. We do it as the rest of the year when it's moist soil. So yeah.
Good one. All right. So we'll keep going, and if any questions come up, make sure you put them in your questions box there, and we'll address them as we go. Go for it, Lance.
No worries. Yeah, this paddock here, it's a bit of a mistake. Is what can happen. Usually like to only run, you know, two cereals in a row, maybe 3 if it's really good. But this paddock, we needed 64 hectares at the time. This was a few years ago now, to square up the rotation. So, you know, or 60 hectares we needed. This paddock was 64 hectares. So we've got righto, we'll do that. So that ran an extra year in the cereal rotation. So mistake number 1, it was an extra cereal. Mistake number 2, it was like we had a problem with the trifluridin on our air seeder bar. So that's a strip there where, you know, the monitor was, I was actually on the air seeder that night. The monitor was telling me there was something wrong. I couldn't pick it. I solved the problem by turning the rate down a bit, which stopped the monitor beeping at me. When the sun came up, a third of the bar wasn't spraying trifluorine, so effectively it was trying to poke everything at the other 2/3. So we had a third of the bar that was not spraying trifluorine, seeding up and back that turned into quite a big strip. So if you ever...
You couldn't even blame anyone else for it, Lance. It was your fault.
No, that was my fault. Yes, definitely. So like I say, mistake number one, it was like an extra cereal. Mistake number two was trifluorine not working properly on a third of the bar. Mistake number three, it's gravel country, and as we all know, our gravel country seems to be the worst for ryegrass. And mistake number four, it was right on the bloody driveway, so everybody got to see it. What we can do in that situation, so when we get a dirty patch or a dirty paddock, we actually clip a chute on over the chopper vanes. Now that only takes us 30 seconds. It's just 2 pins that just hold that chute on. So then everything coming out of the header ends up on that conveyor belt. So even though the conveyor belt's only just taking the chaff, at times like this, it will handle everything that will go through the header. So we're getting no residue back on the ground. It's all in, 100% of it's ending up in the car. And we end up with this sort of thing where it's cut off, nice and short. It's all in the header, because the secret is getting it in the header front. Because if you don't get it in there, you don't have it. And you can see there the trail of straw. That's just as the tailgate shoving on the chaff cart. So that's how much material is going up that belt. So that's what that belt can actually handle. When you are taking everything. However, at a guess, I'd say that's what 80% of the farms like. In between the rows you can walk, and there's no ryegrass, or very little. That's where we're at now. There's one there of lupins. We used to grow a lot of lupins, and when we grew a lot of lupins, we grew them on 20-inch spacings. Disadvantage of that is if you get a block tube, you get a 40-inch gap, and lupins aren't competitive with the weeds at the best of times, but you can pretty much walk that gap there, and it's as clean as what you see there. Something we did a few years ago out east on the heavy red country is we sow wheat on 20-inch spacings. You can't do that when it's dirty, so we're doing that for different reasons. Out there it's low rainfall, so we're trying to conserve moisture and let the crop not drought itself out, so it's got moisture to fill grain at the end of the season. But that's what we've been able to achieve out there on some of the country at different times. What we do when we're harvesting, we dump where it's convenient, and by that I mean where it's convenient to burn. So we will put the row across the middle of the paddock, and we'll just hit the button every time we dump, every time we go past that row. So that what that does, it's all about the burning. So it makes it easy, simple. And the cart doesn't have to be full. It's like the box on the header. You just empty where it's convenient. You don't. It's all about keeping the speed up, and the burning. Like I said, burning is the biggest issue. What we do is we come in, when it's burning season, and we've ploughed a break around that just with an old Chamberlain plough, an old 14 disc. Now, we actually haven't ploughed it at full depth, the old 100 mil or 4 inches. It's just skimmed the surface, so all we've done is cut the stubble off. And then we come in with a hay rake, and we rake that windrow inward. So now you've got a nice sort of 6-foot, bare strip there. And then if it is a breezy day, we do have a water truck, which we can come down and spray another 6 or 8 foot of water on the stubble on the outside. But, we only use that when it's breezy or we're pushing time. Most of the time we do this sort of late in the afternoon when the willy willies calm down. We don't get those wind gusts to take the fire over that break. Once we've widened out that break, we just go around the rest of the line. So you can see there, it just burns out the line. So you end up with a burnt strip right across the whole paddock, and your dumps are left to light after that, and you've got a safety margin of probably whatever you make. We make ours about 10 to 15, sometimes 20 metres, either side of the dumps. So then, if a breeze comes up, it's got to go a long way before it can get out. We do most of the burning at night time. We'll start off at 4 in the afternoon, and start maybe on wheat stubble where it's not quite so flammable. Then at night time we move on to the barley stubbles, and we just keep going. So sometimes not uncommon to have 400 hectares where the dumps are light at night. And something I meant to mention earlier was with that elevator, I want to say the burning issue, what it does is it leaves the dumps a lot more open, so you get a lot more short straws in it. You get a lot more air into the stack. So when they burn, they don't actually smoulder for days on end. If you get a breeze is the important bit. So a few kilometres an hour breeze, they'll burn out in about 8 to 12 hours because the air can get into the stack. So and that was the biggest issue we had to solve was the burning. So by putting them in lines across the paddock to make it convenient to burn, and that elevator was what made the burning, a lot safer, I suppose, is the way to put it. You end up with this. That looks bad on the picture there, but probably the best way to describe it, the size of a ute tray. We don't know what it is. And again, it's opposite ends of the scale because at home we get these bare bits, and I don't know whether it's cooked for soil or it's an excess nutrients or what, but the crop won't grow in that spot where the dumps were. But it's only for a year. Next year that'll grow a crop. Out east on the heavy red country, it's totally the opposite. Those circles where the dumps were are the thickest and most healthiest and heaviest patches of crop. So no one can answer that why the whys or what, but it is totally opposite. But we end up with that at home, and I think that's a small price to pay for having hopefully a clean paddock.
Yeah, okay, Lance. Well, we've had a few questions come through, so we might just pause there and tackle a couple of them. You're obviously talking about the burning there, and the burning is the touchy subject, isn't it? And that's the bit where, you can set the neighbour's farm alight and make yourself very popular, of course. You've talked a bit about how to minimise it, but do you think, and I think you quickly made the comment that with the elevator delivery system, that you get more short straws and they burn out quicker. So compared to the blower system, so the blower system is just densely packed in chaff, isn't it? It can smoulder for 2 or 3 days. How many hours would you say it is to burn out your dumps with the elevator system?
Yeah, look, long as the secret is the bit of a breeze, and for us we are lucky that a lot of times that time of year we get a sou'easter, and about 8 to 12 hours and they're gone. It's and that was the secret. It's the short straws. Possibly, the idea at the time was try and catch a little bit off the chopper to get a bit of straw in there. Yep, we get a few more dumps, but as we've sort of gone on and looked at it, I think it was more the blower was actually just pounding everything to pieces because everything that comes off the sieves is actually quite whole and there's a few short straws anyway. So it's that blower that was pounding it all up into a fine dust, and then the air couldn't get into it, so they would smoulder. And I mean, we were no different. Before we drove a chaff cart, we had some neighbours who had a chaff cart, and we'd be over there sometimes a week or 10 days later, fighting fires when a big wind came up. We've had fires get away, but over the 10 years, I think we've had about 3, and it's always you're dealing with fire. It's sometimes can be unpredictable. It's the weather conditions the following day. A couple of years ago, we had one where the forecast was for only 14 km/h winds, and for about half an hour went up to 60 km/h winds, and we had one dump that obviously was a bit close and it got away. But so it does happen, but we just minimise it as much as we can.
Yeah, and you be careful to not put a dump too close to a piece of bush and that sort of thing. Do you come in off the edge?
Yep. Yeah. It's like I say, it's all about the burning of the dumps. So probably our first 3 or 4 laps of a paddock, we pull those dumps in off the edge, and so when you get to where you're going to make your line, we'll do a loop in and dump them in there, and we go out of our way to make sure they're not next to next to a patch of bush or or things like that. Definitely.
Good one. We'll just tackle one more question now and then keep going. And the question is, do you have separation problems inside the header? Like, in some cases, do you think you end up with too much ryegrass going out with the straw? And is there anything you can sort of do to maximise the amount of ryegrass going into the chaff cart?
Yeah, look, it's a hard one. I've always worked on the theory that we're probably only getting 60% of the ryegrass that enters the header, because some of it gets tangled up in that straw for sure and goes out with the rotors. Ari have done the numbers and tell me we're actually getting more, but it's, look, there is going to be some going over the straw, no doubt about it, but it is a numbers game, what you can take away. Now, we run 2 different machines now. We used to run 2 John Deere CTSs, for those who know John Deere's. We've now got one of them on an STS, and I think that's actually a lot better for collecting ryegrass, because when you see a paddock, sometimes you go through a dirty patch, you can see the actual stripes in the paddock. And what we've done on the STS is we've pulled extra wires out of the concaves to let more down onto the sieves. So we're poking more down there to get it out. So I think that might be, there's probably are things that can be done to different headers, but yeah, that's what we've done with ours.
Okay, all right, we'll let you keep going for a little while, Lance. I think you're getting close to the end, aren't you?
I'm not sure, News. We'll see how we go. Yeah, look, one of the most common questions I get asked is, do you have to stop to dump? And I've had people ride on the header with me, and they'll be there for half an hour. So when you're going to dump, I've dumped every time I've gone past the line. Is you don't slow down, you don't stop. It's just you hit the button, and outdoors are set up with micro switches and a control valve. So once we touch the button, it goes through the whole cycle. It will open and then shut and then turn itself off. And so yeah, we just hit the button. You don't slow down. You don't have to stop. It's as simple as that. One thing we have done in the past, through some of those real dry years, is we've put a hay baler through it. Now, what that does, it picks up the dumps, obviously, but it has to be a 4x3 hay baler with 6 strings. We need the extra strings, but there's enough short straws in there to hold them together. And the contractor was happy to do it, because in those drought years, he was getting more bales an hour out of going through dumps than what he was doing chasing windrows around the paddock. So all he did was just keep looping around and just driving through those dumps and just picking them up. And one thing you are left with, it does sift out the short straws, so you're left with probably a foot of chaff there. And we couldn't burn those. We tried burning a couple of them, and they just went back to the old smouldering issue. So because there was no straw in there to let the air into the stack. So in the end, we actually just sowed through those what was left. But with the bales, it's good feed value in those. So wherever they went for feed, people told us they almost licked the ground clean. You've got weed seeds, you've got no headers perfect, so you've got a bit of grain in there. Your chaff's got good value. What it did, it made it movable, because we put chaff in a road train, picked it up and moved it, and you get about 4 tonne in a road train, if that. So by putting it into bales, we were running 1 layer light on a B double. But it just makes it movable. You can't bash them around like hay, but you still got to handle them with kid gloves. But it is an option, for those people who've got stock that might be able to go down that path.
Yeah, so I had a grower from the southwest call me a couple of days ago who says he has a feedlot, and when I told him about that baling option, he was pretty keen on the idea, because that's just another use of the material. Now, potassium, Lance. Obviously, we're removing some residue from the paddock and we're burning it in one spot. I did some measurements a while back and found there's about 10 units of potassium per tonne of chaff dump.
Yep.
And just wondering if you've had to adjust your potassium rates at all over the years with your chaff carts.
No, look, we haven't adjusted it, but look, on the duplex country, we pretty much give it everything it needs, so it gets about 15 units of K every year down the tube. Now, some years that's a blend, some years it's in a compound, just depending on what the price is at the time. In the early days, we tried spreading our potassium, 80, 100 kilos, but we couldn't bring our levels up, so we switched tact and just, okay, we'll put it down the tube, what we'd like for that crop every year. And so that's where we're at now. So we actually haven't adjusted it for what's been taken away, because it is only the chaff. Our carts are about 22 cubic metres. There's roughly one of those squares per chaff dump, and we worked out they were about 400 kilos of bale. So that is, and we're getting that out of probably one box, or probably not quite one box full of grain. on the header, so that'll give you some idea of what's been taken out. But we haven't adjusted our rates at all. It's just, you know.
Yeah, it's hard to do these numbers without.
We still have pretty much bulk with residue.
Yeah. Now, I think when I did the numbers, I think it was roughly $1 to $2 worth of potassium per tonne of wheat that you harvest, so that you are removing. So there is a cost, but the chaff cart you might be removing 10 or 15% of your residue. Windrow burning, you are putting, you're removing 50% of your residue. So while we are removing some potassium, it's a lot lower potassium costs than windrow burning, for example. All right, we'll keep ploughing on, Lance.
No worries. Yeah, so some of those pictures were from a few years ago. So last year or the year before, I thought I'd better update them. So again, this is just two different varieties. We've got a new variety of wheat, so we pushed it over 2 foot to just to separate the two varieties. And you can pretty much walk the length of that paddock. And this particular paddock was one where we actually first encountered our resistant ryegrass in that way back when we first went continuous cropping. So we've been able to go from having to grade our wheat to get the ryegrass out to that, and we've never taken that paddock out of crop. Like it's been cropped every year. Just another one of odd piece in a paddock. You got a bank there. Auto steers up and back, and they haven't swung around the air seeder to fill that gap in. One or two, I think they were wild oats there, but that's usually if we leave a bit out or miss a bit, they get full of weeds. But that's where it's at. Another one of where the dumps burn. Obviously, you still see the ash there where we've sowed through. One thing we don't seem to get, if we've burnt them and then we get a good early rain and whatever is in there it dilutes out, we don't seem to get those patches as bad. But we do a lot of dry seeding, so that would have been seeded straight through, and that's where it's what we end up with. Another one there of lupins. It's a headland. Auto steer's taking a bit, to pull back on the line. Switched on a bit late. But yeah, you can see the stubble standing from last year, so it's, that's where the crops are at. These sort of patches, again, auto steer straight up and back, creek line where it's gone around. Even harvest time or seeding time, I try to get the boys to swing around and pick that up and do it. They tell me, like, this one at seeding time, there's probably 10-foot strip there. It's not a real big area. He tells me, well, it's not worth swinging a whole air seed around to get that little patch. The double sowing on the rest of the bar, the time, the fuel, all that effort. It's costing us more than what it's going to make us. And technically he's probably right, but I tell him I want all those bits done for competition, for the weeds and that sort of thing. So I usually tell him I'm the boss, and that makes me right. So we just want competition in those bits. Now this bit here, this is back in that paddock I showed earlier on where we had the problem. It's right on the driveway. I'm right up with technology. This was taken last year. I kept thinking I should take a photo of this windrow, but forgetting I actually had a camera on my phone. So when I got there, it had been sprayed and seeded. So that's barley at 2-leaf stage. But that row there was ryegrass. Now what that was young bloke young bloke home from school on the header, and as with all young people, he's on his phone, forgets the chaff cart full. He's turned the corner there, chaff cart's full, and the belt is actually dragging everything back out of the cart and putting it on the ground. So it's making a nice, neat windrow. And that stood out. And like that was actually 2 seasons before that windrow was made, and it still showed up. So that just indicates how much we are collecting in the header front and getting up into the cart when there's room in the cart to put it. There's a picture up the top right-hand corner there of what I showed earlier of that paddock. That's that paddock last year, and that's, again, we haven't taken it out of crop. We've just used all the tools in the toolbox, with a bit of rotation, that sort of stuff, and that's where that paddock's at now. So we've been able to turn it around and not had to fallow it or take it out to pasture or anything like that.
Yeah, and that's really the big story, isn't it? That once upon a time we used to say if you have a blowout, you've got to drop it out of crop for a while, but you fix your problems in crop. Okay, Lance, some questions have come through. harvest height and your wheat or your crop row spacing?
Yeah, well, row spacing is 10 inches. Yeah, that's where we're at. I don't know whether there's any magic number for that. That's just what our bar had on when we bought it, so that's that one. Harvest height is universal measurement of beer can. Pretty much, we were doing that before we went to a chaff cart for stubble management. It's because it's all about what you can get in the header front. If you can't get the weeds in the header front, you don't have that opportunity to catch them. Occasionally, sometimes, one of the header drivers will knock a beer can over and cut it even shorter, but that's not an issue. The issue is if you're going too high and you're missing it. Yeah.
Australian beer can's 13 centimetres high as well, in case you're wondering.
I've never measured it.
And people ask, do these things slow you down at harvest? I think you would say the cart doesn't slow you down, but obviously cutting that low is slower than just nipping the heads off.
Oh, yeah. Look, it's that long since we've just taken the top side. We've done it even before we drag carts. But like I say, for weed, we've done it for to be able to get through it at seeding time. So I can't remember, but it would be definitely slower than taking just heads. But if you're going to go over the top of the weeds, well, you're not going to get them in the cart anyway. But the cart itself, with the elevator, doesn't slow the header down. We don't even know it's behind on your normal harvesting. When you're doing 180s at the end, like you turn to come back on yourself, you've got to remember it's there and just watch it in the mirror. But it's like anything, as soon as you get used to it, it's right. Normal harvesting around rocks and trees, you don't even know it's there. With the elevator, it doesn't slow you down at all, and you don't even slow down to dump. You just hit that button and it just out it goes.
Yeah, and I think you already said this, Lance, but there was a question of how often do you dump compared to the relative to emptying the grain tank?
Yeah, we dump where it's convenient. So often the char cart's only half full or 2/3 full because that's where the line is going to be to burn. If on our headers with 36-foot front and around about 7.5, 8 tonne of grain in the grain tank, we nearly can get a full chaff cart per grain. Per box full, and it doesn't seem to matter what the crop's like, because I guess if there's more grain, there's more chaff. So that's the rough things. But we just dump where it's convenient to burn. It's all about the burning.
When I measured it years ago with a few different growers, it was 4 cubic metres of chaff per tonne of grain, and the chaff weighed 50 to 100 kilos per cubic metre. And another question, last one for now. If your paddock is clean, do you still use the chaff cart? Or do you just chaff cut the dirty paddocks?
No, we use the chaff cart all the time, regardless, because there is going to be a patch out there somewhere or a weed out there somewhere. We don't unhook them. One of the headers we don't even have to unhook to clean, and at the end of the season, so it's actually back in the shed. It never gets unhooked. The other one we have to unhook it to get the sieves out and clean the header down. So that's the only time it gets unhooked. But now every crop, every year, it's one of those things. It's it doesn't slow us down, and there's always going to be a weed out there somewhere.
Yeah. Okay, you got a couple more slides, Lance, or are you?
Yes, I think there is.
We'll find out. Just click the arrow button and see what happens.
Yep.
There it is.
What I wanted to point out here is, this is the start of seeding. First day of seeding. Now we set our start date by when we want to finish. So we want to finish on this day, so we work back. There's this many days of sowing, so there's probably 2 or 3 days worth of moving between farms, so move it back another couple, another 3 days worth of breakdowns, and then sometimes we might throw in a few days of just because stuff happens, and that's how we set our start date. So that's the first day of sowing. And this was a couple of years ago now. They're somewhere in the middle of seeding time, and there's the last day of seeding. So our entire program that year was in dry. The air seeder was clean and back in the shed when the opening rains came at the 3rd week in May. So we couldn't do that without having clean paddocks. Now look, we've still got problem patches, but they're just not everywhere or big areas. And that's what we've been able to achieve. So the chaff cart, it's not a silver bullet by any means, but it's a pretty big linchpin in the whole system. So it's about using every tool that you've got in the in the toolbox. And I can't emphasise that enough. It's not a silver bullet. It's just another pretty big tool. So I think that's it, Pete.
Excellent. Good on you, Lance. Ellen, if you can hand back control to me. Yeah, that's a great story, and I think that where you finished there is probably where we should have started, and that is that you can only dry seed your whole program if you've got really low weed seed bank, and that's how you make money out of doing this stuff, isn't it? It's by letting you farm how you want to farm, and I think Ray Harrington coined the phrase the farmer calls the shots, not the weeds, and I think that pretty much sums it up.
Yeah, yep, definitely.
Now, there was a question came through a couple of minutes ago about grazing chaff dumps, so please put any more questions in for Lance, but I was just going to show a couple of slides on grazing chaff dumps. I've had a bit of contact with a grower by the name of Andrew Boltby in York who grazes his chaff dumps. He's got the air slinger type chaff cart, the TrueFab chaff cart, not the conveyor belt, not that I think that matters. There has already been a video done, that's it there, so if you want to check it out on YouTube, there's a video of Andrew explaining it, and we also did a WeedSmart webinar with Andrew, which is on the WeedSmart website for anyone who wants to hear that one as well. But just the quick snapshot is he grazes his chaff dumps. The sheep do very well, not that they've been measured, but sheep are only a small part of his business, but his sheep do well on them. That's a cereal chaff dump there that's been grazed. The sheep only graze a bit of the cereal, so he then runs over it with a scarifier to knock it down to about a foot high and then just seeds through it. And so that's a chaff dump from last harvest there, just seeded through and left, and you can see there's not much wheat or barley in this case growing, but there's not many weeds either, and you end up with a big sort of foot of compost of rotting chaff, and then it rots down in the second year, and there's a dump that's 2 years old. So you would expect it to be a big patch of weeds if you'd left it and not burnt it, but in his environment he's finding that that sure you get a couple of weeds there, but really a lot of them tend to rot, and so it's quite a big benefit. This is what he's had a go at this year, where on the 10th of July he thought, I'm going to have a go at winter burning, so I thought, well, I'll graze these dumps, we'll knock them with a scarifier, we'll seed through them, so there's been no burning in April, and then he has then just literally, I think, sent his wife out with a firebug for a day, and she's just lit up all of the remaining chaff dumps in the crop. So you've got a green crop with the chaff dumps in them, and so there's no need for a fire break there because you've got a green crop. So obviously waiting for a couple of weeks dry spell during the growing season, which we unfortunately seem to get these days, and just burning the dumps, and that's what the end result was. So burnt dumps in amongst a green crop later on, and just removing that residue. Now Andrew sort of says it's early days, we're not sure if we need to do this or not, or whether the old system of just leaving them to rot is a good system, so we'll find out, I guess. But there's just another alternative there for people that are very nervous about burning in April or even March, April, May. There is the alternative to seed through them and burn them later on. We know that with ryegrass, only a small percentage of ryegrass survives passage through the rumen, so grazing with sheep is okay. Grazing with cattle, we know that a lot more ryegrass does go through the rumen, so they will redistribute a lot of ryegrass back into the paddock. But there are people doing that, grazing with cattle, but obviously sheep is a better option. And there's just a slide showing some old work by Keith Devonish and Danny Roberts from the Ag Department back in 2001. They'd put a farm note out on this. Excellent farm note. It's one of my great regrets that I didn't do enough with it at the time, showing how the feed value. Now you can see that canola and lupin are higher protein. Talking to Andrew Boltby, he grows a lot of canola, and he says the sheep eat every last scrap of a canola pile, whereas the cereals, they pick through the good stuff and leave quite a bit. And so the energy is a little bit low, but some good protein in the canola and lupin. So look, there's an option as well, grazing dumps. One of the rare things that is in mixed farming, good for the crop and good for the stock. So that's just a snapshot. You can put through any questions on that. There's one or two more questions come through. Lance, what about summer spraying when you've got chaff dumps everywhere? How do you manage that?
Look, no worries at all. It's one of those things you learn as you go. Even when we first started, if we were unloading into the chaser bin on the run, we would switch off and the tractor would go around the chaff dump and then pick up the other side of the chaff dump again. You know, then one year we had a bloke from the city on the chaser bin, and once we got him sort of all set up and going, we come up to the first dump. I switched off. He was told to just look ahead and, you know, don't worry about it. He, you know, kept heading straight for the chaff dump, and I thought, oh well, this will be interesting, see what happens. And the tractor just washed it down and it kept going. So even someone from the city can teach you something new. So now we don't even switch off. We just, you know, we just unload straight over the chaff dumps, everything. And we took that same approach with summer spraying. You know, we have a self-propelled boom spray, so yeah, you slow down a bit, but you just drive straight through them and you hardly feel them. So you might lift your boom slightly. So yeah, in the old days when we still had a boom spray behind the ute, you used to have to go around them just with the ute, but the booms would go over them. So yeah, they don't. With a tractor, you know, chaser bin spraying, we just treat them as if they're not there.
Yeah. And I know that some people with the bigger chaff carts end up with quite tall dumps, and I know some of them have adjusted the back door so that it doesn't open too far, so it just knocks the top off the dump so that they can lift the boom over them rather than have too tall a dump.
Yeah, and they actually sag a bit too. Like they slump quite a lot. Like when you are harvesting it, they're quite tall, but within a couple of weeks they've sunk quite a bit. So they do look, you know, get smaller and smaller as time goes on.
Yep. Now a question came through, what about the survival of radish seed through the rumen of sheep? And I don't know the exact answer to that. I've heard conflicting reports, anywhere from 0 to 9%, and I'm not sure what the right answer is. And so I'm wondering if I can, Ellen, get that person's details and try and get that answer back to them. But yes, I think wild radish, it is low survival through the rumen, but I don't know the exact answer. Okay, I think we're coming to the end. If another question or two comes through, we'll get to it, but I think we'll wrap it up there. That's been really good, Lance. Lance has hit the road many times with Ari and given that presentation, and it always goes down extremely well. There's nothing like hearing from the horse's mouth from a grower who's using these practices to help other growers adopt the practice if it's the right thing for them. I think Lance has really changed the face of chaff carts in terms of not only, you know, being instrumental in getting that conveyor belt or the conveyor belt elevator technology onto the chaff cart, but also travelling around the country and sharing his knowledge with other growers. So, and I think you're off next week again, or week after next, is it, Lance, off to Queensland to talk chaff carts in that part of the world, is that right?
Yeah, next week Queensland, yep, so somewhere different again.
Yeah, well, good on you, Lance. We appreciate your time this morning, and thanks everyone for logging in. We've had a really good session, and if you missed anything, it'll be up on the WeedSmart website. The recording of the webinar will be up on the website. So have a great day.